Welcome to the Sleepy Couch. Tonight we're doing something different. 200 facts about the greatest television shows and movies ever made. The Sopranos, Pulp Fiction, The Office, Titanic, Shawshank, The Godfather, Stranger Things, Seinfeld, and about 20 others you weren't expecting. Whether you're here at 2 in the morning because sleep has escaped you again, or you've pressed play knowing exactly what comes next, you're welcome here. Get comfortable. Adjust your pillow. Let the day go. This is the Sleepy Couch, and we're just getting started. TV dramas that broke the rules. The Sopranos almost didn't have the Tony Soprano we know. In the original pitch, Tony was a comedic figure, bumbling, incompetent. HBO's Chris Albrecht pushed David Chase to make him genuinely terrifying, intelligent, and human. That note changed television forever. The FBI used The Sopranos as a training tool. Real agents watched specific episodes to understand how organized crime families operate. Because the show captured the psychology so accurately it functioned as documentation, Gandolfini prepared for Tony by meeting with a clinical psychologist, not to portray mental illness, but to understand what it feels like to be afraid of your own mind. The finale's cut to black had 5 different versions. Chase decided 72 hours before airing. 2 HBO executives thought the feed malfunctioned. 300,000 viewers called customer service in the first hour. The switchboard crashed. 3 real New Jersey mobsters were caught on tape discussing the show. They praised its accuracy. The recordings were used as evidence in federal court. The mob watching itself on TV and getting caught doing it. The Wire was never a ratings hit. Renewed season by season on critical support alone. Obama called it his favorite show. Omar Little was his favorite character, a gay black man who robbed drug dealers with a shotgun. Think about that. Better Call Saul was supposed to fail. The spin-off nobody wanted became the prequel everyone needed. 6 seasons. Emmys. Many critics now call it the better show. Peaky Blinders is based on a real gang from 1890s Birmingham. They sewed razor blades into their caps. The BBC nearly canceled it after Series 1. One internal advocate fought for 3 months to save it. Cillian Murphy spent months learning to read lips for Tommy Shelby. A man deafened by trench warfare, that stillness, that economy of expression. Murphy's idea, not in the script. The Comedies that saved us Seinfeld was rejected by NBC as a show about nothing, starring nobody, with nowhere to go. That executive was fired the following year. The finale was watched by 76 million people. George Costanza is Larry David's self-portrait. When Jason Alexander asked how to play a scene, David said, "Like me, do what I would do." Alexander won Emmys for it. Kramer was based on a real neighbor named Kenny Kramer. The real Kenny later ran a Kramer reality tour bus service in New York. The fictional neighbor became a real tour guide. The Office was almost canceled after season 1. Internal NBC memos called it a costly experiment. A new executive watched the pilot, saw what everyone missed, and ordered 6 more episodes. 9 seasons later, it was watched for over 2 billion minutes in a single month. Steve Carell told a journalist in 2005 that he expected 2 seasons. John Krasinski was rejected twice before filming a self-tape in his apartment that got him cast within an hour. The improv ratio was 70%. Most of the show's best moments were never written down. Parks and Recreation's first season was, by the showrunner's own admission, bad. They rebuilt it around optimism instead of irony. Leslie Knope became competent and idealistic instead of delusionally incompetent. show became something completely different. Better. Fleabag's pilot audience was too small to register in ratings. 2 years later, Phoebe Waller-Bridge won the Emmy, first British woman to do so. Schitt's Creek was conceived as one season. When it blew up, the creators deliberately didn't extend it. The final season swept every major Emmy comedy category, the first show ever to do that. How I Met Your Mother filmed its ending at the end of season 2. For 8 years, the cast knew how it ended. The audience didn't. When it finally aired, millions were disappointed. The creators acknowledged that the story they wanted to tell, about grief, about the love that outlasts death, might have been different from the one the audience expected. The films that almost weren't The Shawshank Redemption earned $16 million against a $25 million budget. 7 Oscar nominations, 0 wins, lost to Forrest Gump, a commercial disaster. Then people found it. Home video, cable, word of mouth. It climbed to the top of IMDb's greatest films list and has stayed there for 20 years. The Biggest Failure of '94 became the most beloved film of the century. That doesn't happen, except it did. Stephen King sold the rights for $5,000, never cashed the check, framed it, and sent it to the director with a note, in case you ever need bail money. Rob Reiner offered $2.5 million for the screenplay, planning Tom Cruise as Andy and Harrison Ford as Red. Darabont said no, wanted to direct it himself. First-time director turning down millions. That bet either ends your career or makes it. Red was originally a white Irishman with red hair. The filmmakers cast Morgan Freeman anyway. His son Alfonso appears as the younger version of Red in mugshot photos. Also shows up shouting "fresh fish" when inmates arrive. Father and son playing the same character at different ages. The sewage pipe Andy crawls through was filled with real cow manure. Robbins did it himself. 500 yards. The baseball scene took 9 hours. Freeman showed up the next day with his arm in a sling. Said nothing during the shoot. The prison, Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, was scheduled for demolition. The production convinced authorities to delay. It's now a museum, reportedly haunted. Tourists come for Shawshank. They stay because of the ghosts. The Godfather nearly didn't get made. Paramount had a $2.5 million budget, wanted to set it in the present day, tried to fire Coppola, tried to fire Pacino 3 times in the first week, wanted Warren Beatty or Robert Redford for Michael. Coppola fought them on everything. Brando wasn't wanted. Paramount set 3 conditions. He had to audition, take a pay cut, and post a $1 million bond for good behavior. He stuffed cotton balls in his cheeks, slicked his hair with a shoe polish, and sat in silence for an hour before anyone arrived. The executives approved him immediately. He refused his Oscar, sent Sachin Littlefeather instead to protest Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans. The horse's head in the bed was real, purchased from a dog food manufacturer. The cat in Vito's lap was a parking lot stray. Nobody planned it. Lenny Montana, Luca Brasi, was a real mob enforcer, already on set as a bodyguard. Coppola saw his 6'6" frame and cast him. Montana was so nervous in front of Brando that he kept forgetting his lines. Coppola thought it made the scene more real and kept it. The original cut was 5 hours. When Coppola trimmed it to 2:15, Paramount said he'd shot a movie, but brought down a trailer. They told him to put it back. Epic cinema and the art of production hell. Let's slow things down a little now. Pull the blanket a bit higher, because this next section is about the movies that nearly killed the people who made them. And we start with one of the most expensive gambles in cinema history. When James Cameron pitched Titanic to Fox, he told them the budget would be around $100 million. By the time filming ended, the total cost had ballooned past $200 million. Fox executives were so nervous, they started calling the movie the biggest disaster since the Titanic itself. One executive reportedly kept a cyanide pill in his desk drawer as a joke. Nobody at the studio was laughing. Cameron built a near full-scale replica of the ship, 975 feet long, 17 million gallons of water in the tank. The grand staircase was built twice, one for dry scenes, one to be flooded and destroyed. When the ship broke apart in the film, it was a real physical effect. The stunt performers sliding down the deck were hitting real steel railings. Several extras were injured during the sinking sequences, though nothing life-threatening. The water in the tank was so cold that Kate Winslet got pneumonia during production. She later said she would only work with Cameron again if she earned a lot of money. Leonardo DiCaprio was not the studio's first choice. They wanted Matthew McConaughey. Cameron said no. Cameron almost always says no to whoever the studio suggests. During the scene where Jack draws Rose, DiCaprio's hands were not actually drawing anything. Cameron's hands were used instead, drawn in reverse because Cameron is left-handed. Then the footage was flipped. If you look closely at the framing, you will notice the composition subtly shifts in those shots. Most people never do. The elderly couple lying in bed together as the water rises was based on Isidore and Ida Strauss, the co-owner of Macy's, and his wife. When offered a seat in a lifeboat, Ida reportedly said, "I will not be separated from my husband. As we have lived, so will we die. Together." They were last seen sitting in deck chairs on the boat deck. Now, let's cross an ocean and about 50 years of filmmaking to get to New Zealand. Peter Jackson spent 7 years making the Lord of the Rings trilogy, 3 films shot simultaneously, 274 days of principal photography, 40,000 extras, 48,000 pieces of armor, 19,000 costumes. The numbers are absurd. The Shire was built a year before filming began so the gardens would look naturally grown in. Real vegetables were planted, real flowers. Jackson wanted the audience to feel that hobbits had been living there for generations, not that a set decorator had been there last Thursday. Viggo Mortensen broke 2 toes when he kicked the orc helmet in the 2 towers. That scream of anguish you hear is real pain. Jackson kept the take. He almost always kept the take when actors hurt themselves. There is a pattern in epic filmmaking where directors seem to believe suffering produces better art. Whether that is true is a conversation for another night. The Battle of Helm's Deep took 4 months to film. 4 months of night shoots in the rain. Mostly real rain piped in from above. The crew called it the Helm's Deep Death March. By the end, several stunt performers had developed respiratory issues from the cold water and long hours. Sean Astin stepped on a piece of glass in the water during the scene where Sam chases Frodo's boat. The wound required 20 stitches. He finished the scene first. That is Sam Gamgee energy if there ever was such a thing. And then there is Gladiator. Oliver Reed died during production. Heart attack in a bar in Malta. He was 61. Ridley Scott still had scenes left to shoot with Reed's character Proximo. So they used a combination of shadow tricks, body doubles, and early digital face replacement that cost $2 million for about 2 minutes of screen time. You can feel something strange in those final Proximo scenes if you watch closely. A distance, a softness in the framing that is not quite accidental. Russell Crowe hated the original script. He told Scott, "Your writing is garbage, but your vision is good." Crowe rewrote many of his own lines on set, including the famous "My name is Maximus" speech. The script was being rewritten so frequently that the actors sometimes received pages the morning of shooting. Joaquin Phoenix asked Ridley Scott, "Are you even going to tell us how this ends?" Scott reportedly said, "I'm still deciding." The tigers in the arena scenes were real. One of them came within a few feet of Crowe during filming. The safety protocols involved a hidden trench between the actors and the animals. Crowe later joked that the trench wasn't deep enough and the tiger wasn't slow enough. Steven Spielberg directed Saving the Private Ryan's opening sequence, the Omaha Beach landing, in a way that permanently changed how war is depicted on screen. He used desaturated color, handheld cameras, and removed the protective glass from the lenses to let sand and water hit the film directly. Several D-Day veterans who attended test screenings had to leave the theater. Some could not finish watching. The sequence took 4 weeks to film with over 1,000 extras. Spielberg did not storyboard it. He wanted the chaos to feel spontaneous, as if the camera operator was a real soldier running through the carnage. The explosions used real pyrotechnics with reduced charges. Amputees were used as extras to depict soldiers losing limbs. It remains one of the most viscerally disturbing and technically accomplished sequences in film history. Spielberg did not collect his director's fee for the film. He considered it a memorial and said he could not in good conscience profit from the suffering of the men who actually lived through it. Martin Scorsese shot Goodfellas with a kind of controlled recklessness. The famous Copacabana tracking shot, the one where Henry and Karen walk through the kitchen and into the club in one unbroken take, was born out of necessity, not artistry. The club would not let them film through the front entrance, so Scorsese took them through the back. 8 takes to get it right. The timing of every waiter, every busboy, every background actor had to be precise to the second. Ray Liotta improvised most of his narration in the voiceover booth. Scorsese would give him the general idea, and Liotta would just talk. That conversational, slightly manic quality of Henry Hill's voice was not written. It was performed. Joe Pesci's funny house scene was based on something that actually happened to Pesci when he was working in a restaurant as a young man. He told a mobster he was funny. The mobster did not appreciate it. Pesci survived. The story became one of the most quoted scenes in cinema. Worlds that never existed. This is the part of the night where we leave reality behind entirely. Science fiction, fantasy, the genres that ask you to believe in things that cannot possibly be true, and then make you cry about them anyway. Close your eyes now if you haven't already. Let the worlds come to you. The Duffer Brothers created Stranger Things after being rejected by every major network. 15 to 20 rejections depending on who you ask. Nobody wanted a show about kids in the 80s fighting interdimensional monsters. Netflix picked it up, partly because of a mood reel the brothers made that felt like a lost Spielberg film from 1983. Millie Bobby Brown was 11 years old when she shaved her head for the role of 11. She cried afterward, not because she was upset about her hair. She has said she did not care about that, but because she suddenly felt different from every other kid in her school. The isolation of the role began to mirror the isolation of the character. The Upside Down was originally going to be called The Nether. The name was changed because it sounded too much like a video game. The Duffers wanted something that felt like a child would name it, something a kid would whisper to another kid under a blanket with a flashlight. Winona Ryder's performance as Joyce Byers was fueled by real anxiety. Ryder has been open about her struggles with anxiety and depression, and she channeled that into a character who is constantly on the edge of falling apart. The Christmas lights communications scene the one where Joyce strings up an alphabet on the wall, was improvised in its emotional beats. Ryder decided in the moment how frantic Joyce would be. Christopher Nolan's Interstellar used real science as its foundation. Kip Thorne, a Nobel Prize-winning theoretical physicist, served as executive producer and scientific consultant. The visual effects team at Double Negative spent over a year rendering the black hole Gargantua using Thorne's equations. The result was so scientifically accurate that Thorne published 2 academic papers based on the visualizations the film produced. A Hollywood movie generating peer-reviewed astrophysics research. That is not something that happens often. The dust storms on Cooper's farm were created using massive fans blowing C90 cellulose-based synthetic dust. It got into everything: lungs, cameras, food. Jessica Chastain later said she was still finding that dust in her belongings months after filming wrapped. Matthew McConaughey's reaction to watching the video messages from his children, the scene where decades have passed on Earth while only hours have gone by on Miller's planet, was filmed with McConaughey watching the messages for the first time. Nolan recorded the actors playing his children first, then showed the footage to McConaughey cold. That grief is not entirely performed. The Matrix was originally pitched by the Wachowskis as a comic book. Nobody wanted it. When Warner Brothers finally agreed to make it as a film, they gave the Wachowskis $63 million. Not an enormous budget even by 1999 standards. Every dollar shows on screen. Keanu Reeves trained for 4 months in martial arts before shooting began. He herniated a disc in his neck during training and had to have surgery. 2 of his cervical vertebrae were fused together. He returned to set 2 weeks later. The opening rooftop fight was the last thing filmed because it took that long for Reeves to regain full mobility. The bullet time effect, the slow-motion rotating camera shot during the rooftop dodge, was achieved using 120 still cameras arranged in a circle, each firing sequentially at a fraction of a second apart. The images were then interpolated digitally to create smooth motion. This technique existed in experimental photography before The Matrix, but nobody had ever used it in a narrative film. After The Matrix, every action movie for the next 5 years tried to copy it. The Wachowskis required every cast member to read 3 books before production: Simulacra and Simulation by Jean Baudrillard, Out of Control by Kevin Kelly, and Introducing Evolutionary Psychology by Dylan Evans. Keanu Reeves actually read them. Most of the cast admitted they did not finish all 3. George Lucas wrote the original Star Wars screenplay in longhand on lined paper. He filled notebooks. The early drafts were almost unrecognizable. Luke Skywalker was originally a 60-year-old general named Luke Starkiller, and Han Solo was a green-skinned alien with gills. The Force was initially called the Force of Others. Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker were 2 completely separate characters in every draft until the 3rd film. Alec Guinness hated Star Wars. He called it fairy tale rubbish in letters to friends. But he negotiated 2.25% of the gross profits, one of the smartest deals in Hollywood history. That percentage earned him over $95 million over his lifetime. He later said the money was the only thing about Star Wars he genuinely appreciated. The trash compactor scene was filmed in a real sealed set that was slowly compressed by hydraulics. Mark Hamill held his breath underwater and came up a beat late. Carrie Fisher thought he was drowning. Harrison Ford broke a finger. Lucas kept filming. The lightsaber sound was created by combining the hum of a 35mm film projector with the buzz of a television set with poor reception. Ben Burt, the sound designer, discovered the effect by accident while carrying a microphone past a television. Ridley Scott built the world of Blade Runner by showing his production designer Sid Mead a single painting, Edward Hopper's Nighthawks, and saying, "This, but in the future, and raining." Mead designed the entire city from that conversation. Harrison Ford and Sean Young did not get along during filming. Their on-screen tension was partly genuine. Ford later said their working relationship was professional but cold. The famous love scene between Deckard and Rachel has been reinterpreted by modern audiences as deeply uncomfortable, and Ford has acknowledged that the scene plays differently now than it did in 1982. The film was a box office disappointment on release. It made only $33 million against a $28 million budget. Critics were divided. Audiences were confused. It took the better part of 2 decades for Blade Runner to be recognized as one of the most influential science fiction films ever made. Sometimes art needs time to become what it was always going to be. Stanley Kubrick's 2001. A Space Odyssey was released in 1968, 1 year before the actual moon landing. Kubrick's depictions of space were so accurate that conspiracy theorists later claimed NASA hired him to fake the Apollo 11 footage. Kubrick never dignified the theory with a response. His wife did. She called it the stupidest thing I have ever heard, and I lived with Stanley for 40 years. The HAL 9000 computer's voice was performed by Douglas Rain, a Canadian Shakespearean actor who recorded all of his dialogue in a single 9.5-hour session. He never visited the set. He never met Keanu D'Elia or Gary Lockwood, the film's lead actors. He simply sat in a sound booth in Ontario and spoke into a microphone with the measured calm of someone who has never once considered raising his voice. That calm is what makes Hal terrifying. He never shouts. He never panics. He simply explains, very politely, that he cannot allow you to do that. Back to Earth. Or rather, back to a version of Earth that is slightly worse than ours. The Hunger Games nearly cast Haley Steinfeld as Katniss Everdeen. Saoirse Ronan was also in serious consideration. Jennifer Lawrence's audition tape was filmed on her phone in her apartment. She got the role because, according to director Gary Ross, she had the quality of someone who has already survived something terrible and has no interest in talking about it. Alfonso Cuarón's Gravity contains a continuous opening shot that runs for 17 uninterrupted minutes. The entire film contains fewer than 200 individual shots, compared to the average film, which typically has between 1,000 and 3,000. Sandra Bullock was alone on screen for approximately 90% of the runtime. She trained for 6 months in a specially designed rig that simulated weightlessness. She later compared the experience to being trapped inside a washing machine that someone has attached to a computer. Denis Villeneuve's Arrival was adapted from a short story called Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang. The story is only 34 pages long. Turning 34 pages into a 2-hour film required the screenwriter Eric Heiserer to invent the visual language of the heptapods, the circular inkblot symbols that convey meaning without time. A linguistics professor at McGill University was hired to create a functional alien language. The symbols follow internal rules. They can be decoded. Some fans have done so. Amy Adams was not given the script for the final act until after she had finished filming the first 2/3 of the movie. Villeneuve wanted her confusion and dawning realization to be as authentic as possible. When she read the ending for the first time, she called Villeneuve and wept on the phone for several minutes before she could speak. Then she said, "I understand now." He said, "Good." The numbers behind the screen. Here is where the stories become quieter, a little drier, the kind of facts that settle into your mind like sand filling an hourglass. Numbers, money, records. You do not need to remember any of these. Just let them wash over you. The most expensive television episode ever produced was the final episode of Game of Thrones' 8th season. Estimated cost, $15 million for a single episode. The Battle of Winterfell episode cost slightly less, but took 11 weeks of consecutive night shoots to complete. For context, most network television episodes cost between $3 and $5 million. The Simpsons holds the record for the longest-running American animated program and the longest-running American scripted primetime television series. As of its 36th season, the show has produced over 770 episodes. The total runtime of every Simpsons episode combined exceeds 350 hours. That is roughly 2 weeks of continuous viewing without sleep or pause. The highest-grossing film of all time, adjusted for inflation, is still Gone with the Wind. Not Avatar, not Avengers, Endgame. A film released in 1939 has been seen by more ticket-buying audience members than any film made in the digital age. When adjusted for inflation, Gone with the Wind earned the equivalent of approximately $3.7 billion in today's money. Friends cast members each earned $1 million per episode in the final 2 seasons. 6 actors, 24 episodes per season, $1 million each per episode. That is $144 million in cast salaries alone for those 2 years. Before that deal, the cast famously negotiated together, all 6 or none, which was nearly unheard of in television at the time. Jerry Seinfeld was offered $5 million per episode to make a 10th season of Seinfeld. He declined. That would have been over $100 million for the season. He said the show had said everything it needed to say. Larry David was not involved in the final season anyway. Seinfeld without Larry David's voice was already a different show. The production budget for a single episode of Stranger Things' 4th season averaged around $30 million. Some episodes exceeded that. For comparison, the entire first season cost about $6 million per episode. The show's budget increased 5-fold in 7 years. The most watched single television broadcast in American history remains the final episode of M*********************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** 105.97 million viewers. For perspective, the 2024 Super Bowl drew about 123 million viewers across all platforms. But M*A*S*H accomplished its number with a single broadcast on a single channel, with no streaming, no DVR, no social media. Breaking Bad's ratings increased by over 600% between its first and final seasons. The first season premiere drew 1.4 million viewers. The series finale drew 10.3 million. That kind of growth, a show becoming dramatically more popular every year for 6 years, almost never happens. Most shows peak in season 2 or 3 and then decline. Breaking Bad just kept climbing. Avatar held the worldwide box office record for 10 years. Then, Avengers Endgame briefly surpassed it. Then Avatar was re-released in China and took the record back. Then Endgame was re-released with bonus footage and nearly overtook it again. The two films traded the record like neighbors passing a borrowed cup of sugar back and forth across a fence, neither willing to be the one who stopped. The voice cast of The Simpsons collectively earns approximately $300,000 per episode per actor in its current contract, down from their peak of $400,000 after renegotiations. But those numbers add up. Over 36 seasons, the 6 principal voice actors have each earned somewhere between $60 and $80 million for talking into a microphone. It is hard to imagine a better job in entertainment. The entire Lord of the Rings trilogy was made for $281 million. The first Hobbit film alone cost over $250 million. 14 years of inflation, higher actor salaries, and the addition of 48 frames per second filming explain part of the difference. But not all of it. Sometimes Hollywood just forgets how to make things efficiently. Titanic was the first film to gross $1 billion worldwide. Then it crossed $2 billion with its 3D re-release in 2012. The ship cost $200 million to build for the film. The actual Titanic, adjusted for inflation, cost about $400 million. Cameron spent half the cost of a real ocean liner to build a fake one in a parking lot in Mexico. The Mandalorian's Baby Yoda puppet cost $5 million to build. It is operated by 2 people and has over 30 points of articulation in its face alone. Werner Herzog, who guest starred in the first season, reportedly wept when he first saw the puppet on set. He told the crew, "You are cowards if you use CGI for this character." Netflix spent approximately $17 billion on content in 2023 alone. That is more than the GDP of approximately 70 countries. The platform produces or licenses over 1,500 hours of original programming per year. Most of it will never be watched by more than a few 100,000 people. The economics of streaming remain, by any rational analysis, insane. The entire budget for the first season of The Office was approximately $400,000 per episode. Steve Carell was not the first choice for Michael Scott. Paul Giamatti was offered the role first. He turned it down. Bob Odenkirk auditioned and was seriously considered. In a parallel universe, Better Call Saul's star is also the world's best boss, and that universe is a confusing place. The average Hollywood film now costs between $65 and $100 million to market. Not to make, to market. Television commercials, billboards, social media campaigns, press tours, premiere events. For many films, the marketing budget exceeds the production budget. A movie can cost $80 million to create and $120 million to convince people to watch it. The art is cheaper than the advertising. That tells you everything you need to know about the modern entertainment industry. The Sopranos was HBO's most expensive show when it premiered in 1999, costing roughly $3 million per episode. That figure, which seemed extravagant at the time, would not cover the catering budget on a modern prestige drama. House of the Dragon costs approximately $20 million per episode. The inflation of television budgets over 25 years mirrors the inflation of everything else in American life. Except the television budgets have inflated faster. Disney's acquisition of Lucasfilm in 2012 cost $4.05 billion. Disney's acquisition of Marvel Entertainment in 2009 cost $4 billion. Disney's acquisition of 21st Century Fox in 2019 cost $71.3 billion. In total, Disney spent approximately $79 billion buying 3 companies. The combined revenue generated by those 3 acquisitions has exceeded $200 billion and counting. Whoever approved those purchases will never have to explain themselves to anyone. Seinfeld reruns have generated over $4 billion in syndication revenue since the show ended in 1998. $4 billion for a show about nothing. Jerry Seinfeld's personal income from the show, including syndication, streaming deals, and merchandise, has exceeded $1 billion. He is one of the wealthiest performers in the history of entertainment, and he achieved it by spending 9 years discussing the etiquette of double-dipping chips at parties. The people inside the characters. There is something strange that happens when an actor plays a role long enough. The character begins to live inside them. Not metaphorically, literally. The way they walk changes, the way they hold a glass, the way they look at people when they think no one is watching. This block is about that. Robert De Niro gained 60 pounds to play the older Jake LaMotta in Raging Bull. He ate his way through France and Italy for 4 months. Pasta, bread, wine, more pasta. When he arrived back on set, Scorsese barely recognized him. The transformation was not just physical. De Niro's voice changed, his posture collapsed inward, his breathing became heavier. He carried that weight on screen the way LaMotta carried his regrets, like something he could never quite put down. De Niro also drove a taxi for weeks to prepare for Taxi Driver. 12-hour shifts, real passengers. Most of them did not recognize him. One who did reportedly asked for an autograph and then asked to be dropped off 3 blocks away. The meter was still running. Heath Ledger locked himself in a hotel room for 6 weeks before filming The Dark Knight. He kept a diary. He wrote in character as the Joker, the thoughts, the jokes, the cruelties. He experimented with voices, recording himself for hours, playing them back, adjusting. The voice he ultimately used, that lip-smacking sing-song chaos, was not in the original script. It was not in anyone's imagination until Ledger found it alone in that room. Ledger could not sleep during production. The role had crawled too far inside him. He described his insomnia as the Joker refusing to leave. He took prescription sleeping pills. He mixed medications. On January 22, 2008, 6 months before The Dark Knight was released, Ledger was found dead in his apartment in Manhattan. He was 28 years old. The medical examiner ruled it an accidental overdose of 6 different prescription medications, including oxycodone, hydrocodone, and 3 types of sleeping pills. He won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor posthumously. His father accepted the award on his behalf. Daniel Day-Lewis is perhaps the most extreme example of an actor disappearing into a role. For My Left Foot, he spent the entire shoot in a wheelchair. Crew members had to carry him around the set and feed him. He refused to break character even between takes. For The Last of the Mohicans, he learned to track and skin animals and lived off the land for weeks. For Lincoln, he stayed in character for 3 months and insisted everyone on set address him as Mr. President. Day-Lewis has retired from acting 3 separate times. Each time, he said the process of becoming someone else had become too physically and emotionally damaging. Each time, he was drawn back by a script he could not refuse. After Phantom Thread in 2017, he retired again. So far, that retirement has held. Bryan Cranston has said that playing Walter White changed his marriage. Not in a dramatic tabloid way, in a quieter way. He found himself becoming more controlling, more calculating in small daily decisions. His wife noticed it. She told him. He was grateful she did. Cranston shaved his head for the role and kept it shaved for the entire run of the show. He was so identified with Walter White that strangers would cross the street to avoid him. Once, at a gas station in Albuquerque, a woman asked him if he was really cooking methamphetamine. She was not joking. Anthony Hopkins spent only 16 minutes on screen as Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs, 16 minutes out of a 118-minute film. He won the Academy Award for Best Actor, one of the shortest screen times ever to receive that honor. He prepared by studying files on real serial killers, but he also studied reptiles. The way Lecter blinks, or rather the way he almost never blinks, was inspired by the unblinking stare of a crocodile. Jodie Foster was genuinely unsettled by Hopkins during filming. The first time they met on set, in character, Hopkins stared at her without moving or speaking for nearly a full minute. Foster later said it was one of the most frightening moments of her professional life, and she has worked with some of the most intense directors in Hollywood. Johnny Depp based Captain Jack Sparrow on a combination of Keith Richards and a cartoon skunk. When Disney executives first saw the footage, they panicked. They asked if Depp was drunk. They asked if he was playing the character as gay. They considered firing him. The producer, Jerry Bruckheimer, reportedly told them, "Trust me, just wait until you see the full performance." The full performance earned over $4.5 billion across 5 films. Depp has said that the only note he received from Disney during the first Pirates film was, "Can you tone it down?" His response, according to multiple accounts, was, "No." Joaquin Phoenix lost 52 pounds to play Arthur Fleck in Joker. He ate only an apple and a small portion of steamed vegetables each day. He has described the experience as physically miserable, but psychologically clarifying. The hunger made everything else disappear. There was only the character, only the hunger and the character. The laugh that Phoenix developed for the Joker was inspired by a real neurological condition called pseudobulbar affect, which causes involuntary and uncontrollable episodes of laughing or crying. Phoenix studied medical videos of patients experiencing the condition. He practiced the laugh for months until it felt organic, until the laugh sounded less like a performance and more like something the body was doing against the will of the person living inside it. Christian Bale lost 63 pounds for The Machinist, eating only 1 can of tuna and an apple per day for 4 months, then gained 100 pounds in 6 months to play Batman in Batman Begins. His nutritionist called the weight fluctuation medically inadvisable. Bale called it Tuesday. He has repeated similar extreme transformations for nearly every role since, and his doctors have reportedly asked him to stop. He has reportedly not stopped. Tom Hanks gained and then lost 50 pounds during the production of Cast Away. Director Robert Zemeckis shut down production for a year in the middle of filming to allow Hanks time to lose the weight. During that year-long break, Zemeckis went and directed an entire other film, What Lies Beneath, with Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer. He finished it, came back, and resumed shooting Cast Away as if nothing had happened. That is a level of scheduling flexibility that no longer exists in modern filmmaking. The dark side of the screen. We are deep into the night now. The facts are going to get a little quieter from here. A little sadder maybe, but still interesting. Still worth hearing. The entertainment industry has always had a shadow. This block is about the parts they do not put in the press kit. Stanley Kubrick was so controlling during the production of The Shining that Shelley Duvall's hair began falling out from stress. He made her repeat one scene 127 times. She has described the experience as almost unbearable. In behind-the-scenes footage, you can see her visibly shaking between takes. Kubrick believed that genuine distress produced genuine performance. Whether he was right is a question that has no clean answer. The child actor Danny Lloyd, who played Danny Torrance, did not know he was making a horror film until years after its release. Kubrick shot Lloyd's scenes so carefully that the boy believed he was acting in a family drama. Lloyd did not watch the full film until he was a teenager. He left acting entirely and became a biology teacher in Kentucky. The production of Apocalypse Now nearly destroyed everyone involved. Martin Sheen had a heart attack on set at the age of 36. He crawled half a mile through the jungle to reach the road where a car could pick him up. Filming was shut down for a month. When Sheen returned, he was noticeably thinner, and Coppola shot him primarily from angles that obscured how unwell he still looked. Coppola himself was suicidal during production. He has spoken about this openly in the decades since. The film went wildly over budget. His marriage was strained. He gambled his home, his winery, everything he owned to finish the film. The original shoot was scheduled for 5 months. It took over a year. Typhoons destroyed sets. Marlon Brando arrived overweight and unprepared. Dennis Hopper was using drugs so heavily that Coppola could only get usable footage from him for a few hours each day. The film won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, standing ovation. Coppola went to the microphone and said, "My film is not about Vietnam. My film is Vietnam." Judy Garland was given amphetamines by MGM Studios starting at the age of 16 to keep her weight down and her energy up during the filming of The Wizard of Oz. She was also given barbiturates to help her sleep. This cycle, uppers to work, downers to rest, was standard practice for child stars in the 1930s and 1940s. It was not considered unusual. It was considered good business. Garland struggled with addiction for the rest of her life. She died at 47. Her daughter Liza Minnelli has spoken about growing up watching her mother fight a battle that was built into her bones before she was old enough to understand what was happening. The original cut of Blade Runner included a voiceover narrated by Harrison Ford. Ford hated the voiceover. He has said, with varying degrees of diplomacy over the years, that he deliberately delivered the lines as flatly as possible, hoping the studio would realize how bad the narration was and remove it. They did not. The voiceover stayed in the theatrical cut for 25 years until Ridley Scott was finally allowed to release his preferred version without it. Alfred Hitchcock once said that actors should be treated like cattle. When asked about it later, he clarified, "I said actors should be treated like cattle. I did not say they are cattle." The distinction was not as reassuring as he seemed to think. Hitchcock's treatment of Tippi Hedren during The Birds has been extensively documented. He allegedly controlled her diet, her social life, and her wardrobe off set. During the attic attack scene, he used real birds instead of mechanical ones, despite earlier promises that the scene would use fake birds exclusively. Hedren was scratched, pecked, and struck in the face. She needed a week to recover. David Lynch refused to explain the plot of Mulholland Drive to anyone. When journalists asked him what the film meant, he would either stare at them silently or change the subject to coffee. When Naomi Watts asked him what her character's motivations were, Lynch reportedly told her, "Think of a beautiful sadness." That was the entire direction she received. Lynch also once described his creative process as catching fish. Ideas, he said, swim through the subconscious like fish through dark water. You cannot force them to appear. You can only sit quietly and wait. Some days the fish come. Some days they do not. The waiting is the work. The last 20. We are almost done. These last facts are small ones, quiet ones, the kind you will probably forget by morning. And that is fine. They were never meant to be remembered. They were meant to carry you the rest of the way. The cast of Arrested Development did not know the show was canceled until they read about it online. No phone call, no meeting, just an article. Jason Bateman found out on a Tuesday morning while eating cereal. The rain in the Shawshank Redemption was dyed slightly blue so it would show up better on camera. Real rain is nearly invisible on film. Every time you see rain in a movie that looks beautiful and dramatic, it has been altered in some way. Usually dyed, sometimes thickened with milk. The natural world is not cinematic enough for cinema. In Mad Men, every prop on Don Draper's desk was period accurate down to the brand of pen. The set designers sourced original 1960s office supplies from estate sales and antique dealers across the Northeast. Matthew Weiner, the showrunner, would halt production if a prop was from the wrong year. Not the wrong decade, the wrong year. The sound of the Velociraptor communication in Jurassic Park was made by recording tortoises mating. The sound designer discovered it by accident while visiting a wildlife sanctuary. He described the discovery as both wonderful and deeply uncomfortable. True Detective's 6-minute tracking shot in the 4th episode of Season 1 was rehearsed for weeks and performed live with no cuts, no hidden edits, no digital stitching. The camera operator followed Matthew McConaughey through a housing project, through a house, over fences, through yards, and into a getaway car. If anyone had made a mistake, they would have had to start the entire sequence from the beginning. Nobody made a mistake. Walt Disney was afraid of mice. The man who built an empire on a mouse was personally uncomfortable around them. The Wilhelm scream, that distinctive, slightly absurd scream used in hundreds of films, was first recorded in 1951 for the film Distant Drums. It was used by a soldier being bitten by an alligator. Sound designers began inserting it into other films as an inside joke. It appears in every Star Wars film, every Indiana Jones film, every Lord of the Rings film, and over 400 other movies and television shows. The prop newspaper used in almost every American film and television show for the past 40 years is the same newspaper. It is called the Earl Hayes Press Prop Newspaper, named after the print shop that produces it. If you pause and zoom in on any newspaper held by a character in a sitcom, drama, or film, there is a strong chance it is the same paper with the same fake headlines. In Lost, the numbers 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42 were chosen by the writers with no specific meaning in mind. They were later assigned significance by fans who found connections to everything from the Fibonacci sequence to biblical passages. The writers have said they appreciate the theorizing, but the original selection was, in their words, basically random. Dexter was originally conceived as a comedy. The early pitch documents describe the show as a dark workplace comedy about a serial killer who works at the police department. Showtime executives suggested making it a drama. The writers resisted, then relented, then realized the executives were right. The theme song for Cheers, Where Everybody Knows Your Name, was written by Gary Portnoy and Judy Hart-Angelo. They wrote it in a single afternoon. Portnoy has said that he has written hundreds of songs that took weeks or months to complete, and that the one he wrote in a few hours is the only one anyone remembers. The laugh track used in many classic sitcoms from the 1950s through the 1990s was recorded from audiences who are now mostly deceased. When you hear a laugh track on a rerun of I Love Lucy or The Honeymooners, you are hearing the laughter of people who are no longer alive. There is something about that fact that sits in the chest a certain way. Laughter echoing across decades detached from the people who made it, playing on a loop in living rooms where no one remembers their names. Alfred Hitchcock's cameo appearances in his own films became so expected that audiences would miss the opening of the movie looking for him. He started placing his cameos in the first 5 minutes so the audience could stop searching and pay attention to the story. The final shot of The Sopranos, the abrupt cut to black, generated so many complaints to HBO's customer service line that the network had to issue a statement confirming that the ending was intentional and not a technical error. David Chase has never fully explained what the cut to black means. He has said, It is all there. People have been arguing about what there means for nearly 20 years. In the early days of television, episodes were performed live. Actors memorized entire scripts and performed them in real time, like a stage play broadcast to millions. If someone forgot a line, they improvised. If a set piece fell over, they worked around it. There were no second takes, no editing, no safety net. The last live broadcast drama on American network television was a 1997 episode of ER. George Clooney and the cast performed the entire episode in real time. It was both a tribute to television's origins and an acknowledgement that the era of live performance on the small screen was ending. Nobody has attempted it since for a scripted drama of that scale. The sound of a lightsaber being turned on is technically two sounds layered on top of each other. The hum of the blade is one layer. The ignition, that sharp electric snap, is another. Ben Burt created the ignition sound by striking the guy wire of a radio tower with a wrench while holding a microphone against the tower's metal base. He was looking for a sound that felt both mechanical and alive. He found it on a hillside in California at 3 in the morning. In the original Toy Story, Woody was written as a sarcastic bully. Test audiences hated him. Pixar rewrote the character entirely in 2 weeks, softening him into the loyal, anxious leader we know now. Tom Hanks re-recorded all of his dialogue. He has said that the second version of Woody was closer to who he actually is. Someone who wants everyone to like him and panics when they do not. The longest film ever screened in a commercial theater is Logistics, a Swedish art film that runs for 35 days and 17 hours. It follows a pedometer on its journey from a store shelf back to the factory where it was manufactured, in reverse chronological real time. Somebody made this film. Somebody watched this film. Those are two separate kinds of patience that most people will never experience. The Rosebud sled from Citizen Kane was sold at auction in 1982 for $60,000. It was a prop, a painted piece of balsa wood, but it represented something that could not be bought. The last uncomplicated moment of a man's life. The last time he felt purely happy before money and power and loneliness rearranged everything. The popcorn you buy at the movie theater costs more per ounce than filet mignon. The markup on movie theater popcorn is approximately 1,200%. A bag that costs the theater about 15 cents to produce sells for $7 to $9. The entire business model of movie theaters has for decades been built not on ticket sales but on the markup of corn heated in oil and covered in a substance that is technically not butter. And yet, there is something about sitting in the dark, surrounded by strangers, holding a warm bag of something that smells like childhood, watching a story unfold on a screen 3 stories tall. There is something about that experience that no streaming service, no home theater system, no virtual reality headset has ever managed to replicate. It is the togetherness, the shared silence when the music swells, the shared gasp when the twist lands, the way a full theater exhales at the same moment, like a single organism breathing in the dark. That was 200 facts, give or take a few that slipped in when we were not counting. If you are still awake, I am impressed, and a little worried about you, but mostly impressed. The thing about television and movies, the thing that keeps us coming back, the thing that makes us press play at 1 in the morning when we know we should be sleeping, is not the special effects or the budgets or the awards. It is the feeling that someone, somewhere, understood something about being alive that we could not quite put into words ourselves. Every show, every film, every script that was rewritten 14 times before someone said yes. Every actor who locked themselves in a room for a month to find a voice that did not exist yet. Every director who bet their house on a vision no one else could see. They did it because they believed that stories matter, that the right words in the right order spoken in the right voice can reach through the screen and touch something real inside the person listening. And tonight, that person is you, lying there, eyes closed, breathing slow. You do not have to carry anything right now. Not the day, not the week, not the things you said or the things you did not say. None of that exists in this room. There is only the dark and the quiet and the fading sound of a voice that will be here whenever you come back. This is the sleepy couch. Sleep well. We will leave the light on for you.